All right. Are we ready to kick off, or am I good? Right on. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Canadian Forces Base Edmonton. My name is Brigadier-General Steve Graham, and I'm the commander of the 3rd Canadian Division. And along with my Division Sergeant Major, Chief Warrant Officer Wayne Bantock, it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Edmonton Garrison. So the Edmonton Garrison is the headquarters of the 3rd Canadian Division. That's the largest of the 4 divisions in the Canadian Army, and it covers all of the Army units from Thunder Bay to Victoria and from Lethbridge up to Resolute Bay. We are the Army of the West and the Army of the North, and we live and work in over 130 communities across that vast region. So the 3rd Division trains forces both for expeditionary operations and domestic operations, and we're ready to respond to whatever it is that the Government of Canada asks us to do. Over the next few months, the 3rd Division will deploy troops on numerous operations around the world, including Operation Unifier. That's the Canadian Armed Forces military training and capacity mission in support of Ukraine, and Operation Reassurance. That's our largest overseas mission supporting NATO in Central and Eastern Europe. With that large geographic footprint, the 3rd Division today remains ready to support Canadians domestically here at home. As we saw last summer, when we deployed a total of 8 different times in requests to support disasters from the provinces of Alberta, British Columbia, and the Northwest Territories. And I can tell you that as the commander of the 3rd Canadian Division, I can say with confidence that our soldiers are ready to serve Canadians both at home and abroad. Today it is a real privilege for me, on behalf of the nearly 15,000 men and women who make up the 3rd Canadian Division, to welcome the Honourable Bill Blair, our Minister of National Defence, and the Honourable Randy Boissonnault, the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Official Languages, here to Canadian Forces Base Edmonton. Today they will both get the opportunity to meet and talk with some of our soldiers that have deployed on those operations in the past and will do so again in the future. So ministers, thank you both very much for joining us today here in Edmonton. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to please join me in welcoming our Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Bill Blair. Sir.
Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, everyone. And first of all, General, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And on this rather chilly day here in Edmonton, thank you for a very warm welcome to Edmonton Garrison. It's great to be back here in Edmonton. The last time I had an opportunity to visit this base was in May of this year, where along with Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Boissonnault, we came to see firsthand how the members of the Canadian Armed Forces were fighting the wildfires that they faced last summer, and the remarkable support that they provided to Canadians in a time of great need. We saw how our troops here in Edmonton stepped up for Canada when it mattered most. I've had the opportunity to meet with some of the families that were affected by those wildfires, and I know how much it meant to them that you, our country's military, and all of the fine men and women here who serve our country in uniform were there for them. They were there to help. They were there in their time of great need. And as well, many soldiers here in Edmonton have also deployed on Operation Unifier, General, as you indicate, providing Ukrainians with crucial combat skills. I was in Ukraine just last week with Prime Minister Trudeau, and we heard directly from President Zelensky, as I have heard from their military leaders, about the incredible impact that that training has had. So to all of the Canadian Armed Forces members here who have deployed to Operation Unifier and contributed to those efforts, I want you to know that your efforts to train over 40,000 Ukrainian troops is being recognized around the world, and it's greatly appreciated by the people of Ukraine. And later today, I'm looking forward to welcoming members of Alberta's Ukrainian-Canadian community onto our base for a meeting with some of our personnel who have served in Operation Unifier, so that the members of the community will have the opportunity to say a very sincere thanks, and members of our armed forces will be able to share their experiences. And on behalf of many grateful Canadians, let me personally say thank you to all of our personnel here at Edmonton for all the work that you have done to defend Canada at home and abroad. As the Minister of National Defence, I believe that we have an obligation to provide our troops with all of the tools and modern infrastructure that they need to do their job, whether this is by increasing our defence spending, providing our forces with new and modern equipment, or working to make things easier for military families and more affordable housing and childcare. Because each of our personnel represents the very best of what Canada has to offer. Our military members also deserve to work in modern, clean facilities that are sustainable now and into the future. It's important that they have the equipment that they need to do the job, and that equipment be maintained in good working order. And today, I'm here to provide an update on some of our efforts to modernize our military base here in Edmonton. I'm pleased to announce that we will be investing $43.3 million to upgrade the 124 buildings here at the Edmonton base. These buildings will receive modern retrofits that will better serve our military's needs and save money for Canadian taxpayers. We'll be upgrading everything from lighting to heat to energy recovery systems, installing better, more efficient water fixtures, and much more. And these upgrades will help reduce energy costs on the base by 21%, which will save Canadian taxpayers $2 million every year, $2 million that could be better invested in support for our Canadian Armed Forces. They will lower greenhouse gas emissions by over 5,200 tons a year. That's the equivalent of taking nearly 1,000 cars off the road. And this project will sustain more than 125 jobs during the construction phase. All of this is good news for Edmonton Garrison, as our members will have cleaner, more modern facilities for operating and for training. It's also good news, of course, for the environment. It's going to help save money along the way. Work at the Edmonton Garrison has just recently begun, and we expect to see the first energy savings by next year, and construction will continue through 2026. There are more than a dozen projects like this underway or completed at bases and wings right across the country, from Comox to Alert to Halifax. And all told, we are investing about $370 million in projects like this since 2015. Modernizing our defense infrastructure is critical to meeting the federal government's goal of a net zero emissions by 2050. And it's also one of the goals laid out in Canada's defense policy, strong, secure, and engaged. With today's announcement, not only are we lowering Canada's carbon footprint, but we're also providing our men and women in uniform with more modern, sustainable, and efficient facilities. I want to take this opportunity while I have the mic to thank the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, our National Defence Department, Defence Construction Canada, and Ameresco for all the effort that they have put into this project. And most of all, I want to thank everyone at the Edmonton Military Base for the incredible work that you do every single day, from fighting wildfires to training Ukrainians to keeping Canada safe. You represent the best of what our country has to offer. We will do whatever it takes to support you and to provide you with clean, modern infrastructure for you to do your jobs. I also want to acknowledge, although we are significantly increasing our investment in defense, we must do more, and Canada will do more. The world has changed. The world is becoming a more challenging and dangerous place. We are going to rely on the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces to defend our country, to maintain our sovereignty, and to support our alliances. We know that we need to invest more in the Canadian Armed Forces, and we will invest more in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And now I'll happily turn the mic over to my colleague and friend, Minister Boissonnault.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Blair. General Graham, thank you to you and all the base leadership for such a warm welcome. Like Bill said, despite the temperature, it just reminds people that, you know, prairie folk are hardy people. And whoever you have here in the ranks from across the country know what it's like to survive a winter here in the West. And I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory, the lands of the Plains and Woodland Cree, the Saulteaux, the Niitsitapi, the Dene, and also Métis Region, Homeland Region 4, and the largest population of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. And I know how vital this base is to our community, General. 4,000 regular and reserve force members, 500 civilian staff. Edmonton Garrison is a major hub of operations for the Canadian Armed Forces. And this base and its personnel have a long history and a proud history of serving in some of our country's most important military missions, dating all the way back to the Second World War. And, you know, we remember how instrumental each and every person on this base was in putting together Operation Unifier UK after Russia's brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2002, and we just had a somber anniversary. 2 years into this illegal war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, trying to upset the international rules-based order that has literally led to prosperity and peaceful times since the Second World War. Et mes chers collègues, membres des Forces armées canadiennes ici, à la base d'Edmonton, nous nous souvenons du rôle important que chacun d'entre vous ont fait dans le projet unifié UK après l'invasion brutale de l'Ukraine par la Russie, et nous sommes ici à vos côtés pour continuer à appuyer l'Ukraine. You've provided our Ukrainian friends with training in tank operations, battlefield medicine, so that they can defend their country and democracy writ large around the world. And the work that you do here is critical on the international stage, as well as for Canadians here at home. You hosted and fed 115 families who had evacuated from Yellowknife under Operation Lentis during last summer's devastating wildfires. Personnel at Edmonton Garrison have a habit of making history because of your service. And today I wore my pride scarf. I guess I should have kept it on for this part, General, but I wore the pride scarf today because in 2022, this base became the first place to raise the pride flag, and I know Minister O'Regan and I were here to mark that special day. And look, there are important steps along the way that have made this base more open, more welcoming for its members, to promote diversion and inclusion in the ranks. I know the Canadians from coast to coast to coast are grateful, and I'm going to put in a plug, not because the General asked me, but because to all the people watching today, your government is asking you to take a hard look at the reserves, to take a hard look at a career in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm the Minister of Jobs and the Minister of Official Languages. And if you are wondering what to do with your life, then look at the Canadian Armed Forces. You can serve your country domestically, you can serve our interests around the world, and you can help make the world a more peaceful place by putting your skills and talents into the Canadian Armed Forces and getting trained on the job to follow a career path that you want to see. Donc, chers amis, si jamais vous pensez ce que vous voulez faire avec votre vie, considérez une carrière avec les Forces armées canadiennes, que ce soit dans la réserve ou que ce soit comme un membre de l'armée ou des Forces aériennes ou de notre navire, parce qu'on a besoin de vos talents en tant que pays. And today, Minister Blair, thank you for this $40+ million announcement that is going to make this base more sustainable, save money, put people to work, and actually do the job of not just making our commitments to greenhouse gas emissions, but actually doing right by the soldiers here, making sure that we have buildings that are sustainable for the long term. And with that, let me say, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for standing up for Canadian values. Thank you for helping people in need, whether it's wildfires, whether it's floods. The country needs you. General, I know that we're in good hands with your leadership. Chers amis, merci beaucoup. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. On va maintenant commencer la période des questions des médias. We will now start the question and answer period with media. We'll take one question and one. Please state your name and outlet, and if you have a question, we'll just use this microphone that I have right here.
Hello. This is a question for Minister Blair for CBC Radio-Canada. Haiti has just seen a further security deterioration. There are fears that the whole city of Port-au-Prince will fall before the Kenyan security force can establish itself. What is Canada doing to prevent the gangs from taking over?
Yes, well, Canada has a long history of support for Haiti. We have been working very closely with the United Nations. There is a deployment being made of a UN deployment led by Kenya into Haiti. Canada has already stood up a training mission located in the Caribbean to support that mission. We've also made a number of very important investments in support for the people of Ukraine. Of Haiti. We are very concerned about the deteriorating military situation and the crime situation that is taking place in Haiti. The Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are all working right now to support the PNH, the police services of Haiti, as well as to support the UN mission that will be going there shortly.
Thank you.
Hi, Minister. Morgan with Global Edmonton here. I have some questions from our friends in Ottawa, if you don't mind. Has Ukraine requested the Canadian Armed Forces to send troops to the country?
No. As a matter of fact, we've worked very closely with Ukraine from the outset. In 2015, after the first illegal invasion of the Crimea and the Donbass, when Russia invaded the sovereign territory to Ukraine, we began training of Ukrainian armed forces in Ukraine in 2015. And over the past 8 years, we've trained in excess of 40,000 Ukrainian armed forces members. After the invasion, the Russian invasion into Ukraine that began 2 years ago, we moved some of that training out into the United Kingdom, into Poland, and in Latvia, and some of it's occurring in Canada. We have had a number of discussions with Ukrainians that suggest that when the conditions are right, we may be able to return to training in Ukraine, but those conditions do not yet exist.
And then my follow-up, Minister, is you've said Canada is considering sending a limited number of military personnel to Ukraine under certain conditions.
Yes.
What would those conditions be, and is there a timeline?
Well, my first priority was to ensure the safety of all Canadian Armed Forces personnel. If they are to undertake training missions, for example, in Ukraine, it would have to be under circumstances in which would be safe. We are also very mindful of that the Canadian Armed Forces cannot have any combat role or what could be perceived as a combat role. I think our training has been very effective. We are also committed to supplying Ukraine with munitions and equipment and other material supports in order to assist them in their valiant fight against Russia. But those conditions, as I've said, do not currently exist. But the agreement, our Prime Minister and President Zelensky entered into a security assurance agreement just last week when we were in Kyiv. In that agreement, there is a provision that allows for consideration of deployment of training resources when conditions are right. Unfortunately, right now, those conditions are not right.
And regards to timeline?
I'm sorry?
With regards to timeline, do you want to expand on that?
That depends on when the conditions change. Right now, the circumstances are not appropriate for that training to take place, in our opinion, in Ukraine. But we're going to continue to train. I had the opportunity just last week to be in a Polish military base just on the border with Ukraine, but in Poland, where Canadian Armed Forces members were delivering medical training to Ukrainian Armed Forces personnel. That training is saving lives. It's making a difference. And it's highly valued by the Armed Forces of Ukraine. We're going to continue to do it safely in Poland.
Thank you.
Hi, Minister. Madeline Smith from CBC. I also have questions from my Ottawa colleagues. Generally, how would you assess the state of readiness in the Canadian Armed Forces?
My assessment is that we've got some work to do. Right now, we have a number of challenges ensuring that our military production provides, for example, the munitions that the Canadian Armed Forces need. I'm also very mindful how important people are. You know, we happen to be here at the Edmonton Garrison, and a number of our Armed Forces members stand behind us. There is no more important investment than we can make is to build up the strength of our armed forces through attracting personnel, new personnel with new skills to come and join the remarkable people that are currently serving. And so we've got work to do there. You know, we've made some changes. We've allowed, for example, permanent residents to apply. But quite frankly, our efforts today to get those people onboarded into the Canadian Armed Forces have not been sufficient, and we need to do more. I think we also need to think innovatively in helping Canadians understand why an opportunity to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces is a brilliant career opportunity for them and to attract the people that we need. But in order to ensure that when they join the Canadian Armed Forces, they have access to the best equipment, the best facilities, and the appropriate supports that are necessary, we've got significant investments that we have been making and must continue to make sure that our Canadian Armed Forces are strong and resilient and capable of delivering defense to the people of Canada, but also to fulfill our international obligations.
Then I have a bit of a numbers question as well. So last week's budget estimates for 2024-25 show $79 million is being reallocated out of ready forces. How do you square that with the promise for no cuts to the frontline needs?
Well, in 2017, through our strong security and engaged defense policy, we committed to significantly increasing, almost doubling, actually it will in fact double, the defense budget between 2017 and 2026. So we are on a very positive upward trajectory of spending in defense. But we're spending Canadian taxpayers' dollars. And as in any bureaucracy, I think it's important that we look for the most efficient way to actually deliver the results that Canadians need and deliver for the Canadian Armed Forces. And so I've asked the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defence to look at some of our expenditures for things like consultants, things like executive travel, or even professional services. And I want to be clear, some of those professional services, particularly around the maintenance of our fleet, are absolutely essential to the good order of the Canadian Armed Forces. But there are some, I think it's incumbent upon every government, every bureaucracy, to look for the most efficient ways in order to spend those valuable dollars to get the most public value for the Canadian Armed Forces and for Canada. And so we have been very carefully looking at our spending, but in fact our defense spending is increasing and will continue to decrease. And notwithstanding the plan that we put forward in 2017, we've also clearly indicated that we must do more. And so I have every expectation that with our defense policy update, we'll be able to bring future investments into the Canadian Armed Forces. We have a lot of work to do, and we've got the best people to tell us what needs to be done. We just have to go get it done.
Good morning. I'm Lydia Vasilin with New Pathway Ukrainian News. So Canada paid $406 million to the United States for the delivery of the NASAMS air defense system a year ago, but these still have not been delivered to Ukraine. What is the reason for the delay, and when can the Ukrainians expect this delivery? And then further, what is Canada doing to get what it paid for?
Yes, ma'am, and it's a very important question. Ukraine has been very clear that they need those NASAM missiles in order to defend their country. We believe that the best way to do that, to most expeditiously acquire those missiles that Ukraine said they needed, was to do it in partnership with the United States, which was already in the process of putting together a very significant contract for a number of NASAM missile systems for Ukraine. So we joined in that partnership, and as you said, we committed over $400 million to that partnership, and we put that money into that coalition for joint purchase. Unfortunately, the United States has encountered some challenges with that procurement. I've spoken to the U.S. ambassador to Canada. I've also spoken to the Department of the Secretary of Defense, asking them that they expedite Canada's purchase as quickly as possible. I've also met quite recently with the Minister of Strategic Industry and the Minister of Defense in Ukraine about our efforts to support them. They said they want us to continue to proceed with the acquisition of those NASAM missiles as quickly as possible, and we're doing everything possible to make that happen. But they have other needs, and for example, we've also just recently announced the acquisition and the delivery of 800 drones that Ukraine required, and we're working on delivery of some of the munitions that they have indicated are required urgently.
Okay. As a follow-up question, Ukraine has asked Canada to deliver the surplus CR-V7 rockets that were scheduled for disposal, and they are still in service with many of our allies and in fact compatible with the F-16s. So some reports have indicated that they've been perhaps stored improperly the last 15 years. Are they operational, are in the operational condition, and if so, is your government committed to expeditiously supplying these to Ukraine?
The answer is expeditious supplying to Ukraine with what they need. Yes, we're absolutely committed to that. There were initially about 83,000 of the CR-V7 rockets that were placed into storage. They were actually acquired in the 70s and early 80s. They were taken out of operations and use in 2005, and the 83,000 missiles or rockets that we had at that time were placed into storage and scheduled for disposal. Some of that has already taken place. We do not have the full 83,000, but I believe there are a number of those rockets which are still usable, and there are a number of motors that come on those rockets which the Ukrainians, in my meeting with them last week, have indicated that they could use. We are doing the work right now to make sure that those munitions can be safely transported, and once that has been determined, and that should be only a matter of days, we will move as quickly as possible to get all of that resource to Ukraine as quickly as possible.
Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Hi, Minister. I'm Miriam with CTV. I have a question for my colleagues in Toronto. As former head of the Toronto Police, do you believe the Toronto Police should have done more to ensure Saturday's event at the AGO was safe and secure for the Prime Minister to enter? And was this a policing failure?
I was the police chief in Toronto for a very long time, but it was a very long time ago. I can tell you that I believe that the men and women of the Toronto Police Service are as experienced in public order management as of any police service in the country. I have absolute confidence in their leadership. They have indicated that they are reviewing the circumstances of the demonstration that took place the other night to determine if there is other actions that should have been taken. I'll await the results of that.
And a follow-up here locally. We're just looking for a reaction. We had an alleged City Hall shooter that's now been charged with terrorism. What are your thoughts on that?
With?
with terrorism?
Well, again, the decision, as a former police officer and public safety minister, I know the high threshold that is required for the laying of those charges. I have confidence in the police of jurisdiction here in Edmonton and also the prosecutor, the prosecutorial services here in Alberta to make that determination. I have not seen the benefit of that evidence, but I personally have a great deal of confidence in our police officers and our prosecutors to weigh the evidence and to proceed as necessary. It is very concerning. With a laying of a charge of terrorism, that's a very serious matter, and a matter that requires a high evidentiary threshold. I would also tell you that it's entirely inappropriate for the Minister of Government to opine on the substance of that charge, so as to ensure that the prosecution and the investigation can proceed appropriately.
And just my last follow-up, do you think there's enough being done to prevent domestic terrorism just across the country?
I think agreed. I happen to know what is being done, and I work very closely with the RCMP, with the police of jurisdiction right across this country, with our national security intelligence agencies. I can tell you that they're all laser-like focused on the threat that domestic terrorism, and in particular ideological and hate-motivated violent extremism, could have in our communities right across the country. There is always a concern of individuals who could become radicalized even to the point of extremism and violence, online or otherwise, and so it is essential that our people remain vigilant and that Canadians be aware, and when they become aware, either witnessing it online or maybe a young person in their own family or in their communities, that someone has crossed that threshold into violent extremism, then they have to say something and make sure that we do everything that is necessary to keep our communities safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. That'll conclude the question and answer period, and we'll just hold for a few moments and then turn it over to the next part of the program.